Alright, so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna sort of walk you through the stuff that we talked about how to do last week in the first session of the video game design sort of class that we were doing. So we talked about how to create some basic tile maps and how to bring them into Unity and set them up to with our tile palette here so that we can create different platforms and things for a platformer. So I'm going to go through that process again in case anybody wants to follow along again and see the steps again. It's actually really pretty simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the pen tool here and on my my palette here, or on my window here, my canvas, I'm just going to draw a little bit of a broken line like this. And the thing that's really important about this is making sure that this pixel here lines up with the pixel on the other side. This is because if we're going to create something like this, which is going to be one of our edge pieces here, like this one right here, we want them to line up so that we can actually have it be repeating and not have any sort of seams. So that's why we want to do it that way. Now I'm just going to do something really simple here. So just paint bucket fill that, choose a dark brown here, paint bucket fill the bottom. And now that I have this side, I can actually just take this and I can reuse this art for every other side. We see that I've done it here, and then it's the same art for it down here on the side. And the way to do that in Piskel, I'm using the Piskel app. You can use whatever art program you want to, but I'm just going to duplicate this and I'm going to rotate it using the transform tool over here on the right. So I'm going to rotate that, so now I have my top and my left. I'm going to duplicate this one, now I have the bottom, duplicate, and I have the right. So now just by doing that I was able to create all four sides here, and what we're really going for is being able to create basically any object that we would want, any square object or rectangular object. So in order to do that, we need all of our corners, we need all of the edges, which we just made, and we need a centerpiece like this. So centerpiece is really easy, it's just all one color, so we can do that one now. So paint bucket with the brown, just going to fill all this in just like so. There we go, there's the center one. And now I need to do the corners, which is actually, again, pretty simple. If we take one of the edge pieces, we can just duplicate this and we can look at it and we can say, well, I know that these, if I want them to line up, they need to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 8th pixel in needs to be a black pixel. So if I'm going to make this a corner, then I need to find the 8th pixel over here and make that a black pixel, and then I can fill in the corner however I want. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like that. Then I can just bring this over and fill that up like that. Paint bucket. Again, I'm just doing this for the sake of being quick. And like that, I have a corner. Now we can even see in the preview here that this seam is going to be seamless because I counted the pixels to make sure that it would be. And also we know that this seam, if I'm going on to one of the horizontal ones, will also be seamless because I made it be, right, by counting those pixels. So now I can duplicate and rotate, duplicate and rotate, and duplicate and rotate. Now I've created all of my exterior ones here and the interior, so I have all 9 of these tiles created over here. You could do some fancy stuff. You can use the lighten and darken tool here to do, like, if I hold control and shift, then I can just like make a couple of these darker if I want to. I'm not going to do that right now, but you can add some more details and stuff if you want to. You can also come in here and you can delete some of these corner pixels to make it look like the corner is actually more rounded. It's all just up to you how you want it to look. If you do that, then when you bring it in here, this corner that's down here will be sort of cleared out, so it'll have more of a gradual look. So there's that. I'm just going to leave it filled in so that they're all the same. Okay. Now the last piece that we need is actually kind of a tricky one to explain. So I like to call them the interior corners. So they're this piece right here. They're the one that connects. They are this one right here. It connects a corner to another corner. And we see that they're actually very simple. All they are is just a little bit of green on this corner here. If we didn't have this piece, it would look like that, and our pieces would be disconnected there, right? We wouldn't be able to go up like this. We wouldn't be able to have interior corners like that. All we would be able to do is have exterior corners like this. We wouldn't be able to turn a corner here and go horizontal. So those ones are also very easy. It's just doing a little bit more counting. So we can again take one of these, duplicate it, and we can say, all right, well, I did the math, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just like that. So we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That one right there. Oops. I don't have my black selected here, so we select that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just like that. Do the corner up like that. And now I can switch to my paint bucket, select my brown, fill, 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 fill. There we go. Now I have my interior corner. See how this transition right here is nice and seamless? I can duplicate and rotate, and duplicate and rotate, and duplicate and rotate. Now I have all 4 interior corners so that I can make this transition right here. I have the exterior corners, which are these ones here, and I have the edges. So now I can make any shape like this. I can then, if I want to, I can create additional details and put those onto a different tile map. So that is the first step that we need if we're going to be bringing this stuff into Unity. So once I'm happy with this, I'm actually going to go and export this, make sure that I select the PNG over here on the side. Say export as PNG. We're going to download this sprite sheet, and it will download it into our browser right here. Okay. And then once we have it, we will pull up my Piskel browser. I can drag this into my Unity folder, and it'll show up as an individual sprite. It's thinking that it's all one image, which is not really what we want. That if we were doing like a poster or something like that, then we could import it as a single image, but that's not what we did here, right? We created 13 different tiles. We want them all to be separate. So what we have to do is come over into the inspector. We want to tell it that our sprite mode is not single. There's not just one sprite here. We're going to change it to multiple. We need to change the pixels per unit to the size of our canvas here, which if we look at it, it's 32 by 32. So we're going to change this to 32. Change it to 32. And we also need to do some other things here to make sure that it doesn't try and blur out our pixelation. The pixelation here is intentional. With some other games, it's potentially not intentional. So like if you're doing a texture for a 3D model or something like that, it will try and filter that so that you don't see those pixels. But we want to have no filter and no compression. So we're going to go to compression, say none. So again, that was filter mode, point no filter. Compression to none, hit apply. Now we see that the gray arrow is gone. We told it that it has multiple sprites, but we haven't told it what the sprites are. So if we want those multiple sprites to show up, we're going to go into the sprite editor over here on the right in the inspector. And we're going to go to slice up at the top. Sometimes this image or this window is small like this, so slice is really hard to see. If you just expand it out like this, grab it by the corner, pull it out, then you can see the slice button here. So click on this. We're going to say we don't want it to slice automatically because it'll have a really hard time figuring out where our different tiles are. So we're going to say grid by cell size because we know exactly how big they are. We'll say 32 by 32. Slice. We see that our edges are all nice and perfectly lined up there. We're going to click apply. And then we see in the assets folder, it now has all of our different tiles laid out there for us, which is really nice. The next step that we have to do if we're going to get it to show up on our tile map here is we want to create a tile map. So I already have one that's created here, but if you want to create a new one, you go create 2D object tile map. So you create a 2D tile map, and that will show up with a grid and with a tile map underneath it. So you can expand that by clicking on the little gray arrow next to it to see the tile map underneath. You can also rename this, so I'm going to call this dark tiles, because this is the dark tiles that I have here. I have some light ones and I have dark ones. So now I want to sort of see these tiles on what's called a tile palette. A tile palette is like you see Bob Ross has his palette, his wooden board there with all of his different paints and things like that on it. Well, in our case, we're not going to be using different colors of paints. We're going to be using different tiles on our palette. So we're going to go up to the top. We're going to say Window, 2D, Tile Palette. That'll bring up the Tile Palette window. Oftentimes it will be sort of popped out like this. I don't really like it to be out like this. I like for it to be docked somewhere, so you can just grab it by the words here where it says Tile Palette. If you grab it anywhere else, you'll be able to move it around, but you won't be able to dock it. So if you grab it by the words, then you can actually bring it over, and I like to set it up over here right by the inspector. And by default, yours will not have a tile palette created. I had one out here already so that I could show you what the tiles look like, but it'll just say create new palette right here at the top here. So we want to create a new one. I'm going to call this my dark tiles. And the reason that we need to create a new palette is so that we can sort of differentiate between different worlds and things like that. So if we think about something like Mario, we have the Mushroom Kingdom tile palette, and we would have the Bowser's Castle tile palette. They would be separate. We don't need all of those tiles at the same time. So I'm going to create my dark tiles palette. Select the folder for it to go in. I'm just going to put it in the assets folder. That's totally fine. And now I have an empty palette. The final step before we actually get to start placing our tiles is to just drag the entire image. So this is the imported base image with all the children underneath it. We're going to drag the entire image onto the palette. Again, we could create another folder to house all these things in the assets folder. I'm not going to. I'm just going to say select. And here we see all of the tiles that I have created, and they're all imported into Unity. So one last key thing to sort of focus on here is that the active tile map at the top of the screen here is really important. We need to make sure that we're always working on the correct tile map. If we're not working on the right tile map, you could imagine that you are adding things like spikes and stuff like that, the art for spikes, onto the ground tile map. And that's definitely not what we want. We want to make sure that those things are kept separate. So details should be on a details tile map, foreground and background. We want to keep all those things separate. Now we can select any of the tiles on this palette. We can select multiples if we want to. We can bring them out here, and we can see that we can draw those tiles. Using the default paintbrush, we can do one at a time like this. We can click and drag to create more in a line, We can also, if we select something like the inner one, this one that's in the middle, we can use the rectangle, the paint a filled box tool, and that will allow us to click and drag and just create a large box really quickly and easily. Really nice and handy for creating like edges and stuff like this. Creating the bottom, pop in some corners here, and you see how easy it is to get sort of an environment set up and going. So this is the new tile map that I created, and just to give an example of how we could use the interior corners, we can go and bring out these guys right here, just like this, and so I want to go like this one could come down and this one could go up. So now we see we've used our interior corners here to make it so we can turn this corner without having any sort of problems. So really handy little tile just to make sure that you have, so that your tiles are seamless. So that's how to get our tiles into Unity. We did also talk about how to apply colliders to our objects. So tilemap collider is just a component that we can attach to the tile map that will go through each tile that is on that tile map. So if we wanted to be able to walk on this tile map, then we would need to add a tilemap collider 2D. We add that, and as soon as we see that we did that, it pops up with all of these green boxes around here that says that each of these tiles has a collider. Now this is not the final version of this. We'll have some stuff that we want to add to this to make it so we don't like clip on these corners and stuff. But this is the first step to being able to create platforms for a platformer game. So that's the bulk of what we actually walked through last week. If you have any questions as to how to make any of this stuff work, or if I went through fast, hopefully you'll be able to rewind and go through stuff. But if you have any questions, please post them in the comments, or you can send me an email.